Alright, let's search this up. There it is.
We are looking at how to pronounce Encanto.
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 Stress on the second syllable.
Encanto.
In Spanish and also in English. Encanto.
Encanto. Okay, I think I got it this time, guys. You'd think for someone named Ricardo Flores they'd be able to speak Spanish a little better. I've had a lot of videos in relation to Disney planned for the upcoming weeks. Despite my first video being very critical of them, I'm actually a really big Disney fan like I stated in that video. There's so many things in relation to the company I want to talk about, both good and bad.
An actual e-boy.
But one of those things wasn't Encanto. I seriously had no plans to make a video on this at like any point. The movie came out last year, reviews have been up for it for a while, but it seems like this movie has caught a second wind unlike any other. In the past couple of days, Encanto has achieved a very big achievement, and that is having its song, We Don't Talk About Bruno, becoming the #1 overall song on the Billboard Hot 100, which is the first Disney song to do that, and get this, 29 years. That's right, not since 1993 with A Whole New World from the Aladdin soundtrack has a Disney film achieved this, not even Let It Go from Frozen, which as we all know was such a big success. And while when Encanto first released, it did have a very big critical response of high praise, and there was a huge fan base around it, I wouldn't say it was the next Frozen or heck even Zootopia. It clearly wasn't going to be one of Disney's next big hits. At least that's what we thought at the time. Because since the film launched on Disney Plus, it seems like this thing has absolutely exploded into another stratosphere on the level of Frozen. It's just not a success in the music front, it's a success as a movie as well. Encanto was single-handedly able to restore my faith in Disney animation, becoming one of my favorite pictures from them in the past 10-15 years. And while I still do prefer films like Moana and the original Wreck-It Ralph, and I still do have a soft spot for Tangled, this is definitely on the level of those. But I think there's something to be said about this movie and appreciated about this movie, and not just this movie, but Disney as a whole, for not only allowing this thing to exist, but how this thing was able to exist and grow into one of Disney's biggest successes in the past few years. This is how Encanto took over the world. Like I said, I was losing a little bit of faith in Disney as an animation studio. I thought they were relying too heavily on sequels, and even their original content wasn't really doing it for me. I hated Ralph Breaks the Internet, I didn't like Frozen 2, and I thought Raya and the Last Dragon was incredibly mediocre, even if there are some things to appreciate in it, but I can't stand Aquafina.
Have you ever done like a group project?
Shut! So when trailers for Encanto came out before movies I went to go see at the theaters, I was kind of just thinking, oh, another Disney movie, okay. And I'm gonna be real with you guys, I didn't watch Encanto at the theaters. I was seeing a lot of other movies around that time, and it just really never got on my radar. But thankfully, only like a month after the film's release, it popped up on Disney Plus on December 24th. Not only is this where I experienced Encanto for the first time, but this is where a lot of people experienced Encanto for the first time. I was scared to watch this movie genuinely because I thought it would further solidify that Disney just wasn't the same to me anymore. Everything was trying to be so big and large scale, and with today's movie-going audience being mainly action movie fans, it's kind of diluted the movie industry into being exclusively that. So when Frozen 2 and Raya and the Last Dragon were that, and I didn't like any of the characters or get to know them properly, I thought this was just gonna be the same thing, and I couldn't have been happier that I'm wrong. One of the reasons I love Encanto, and why I think everybody loves Encanto now, is because the movie isn't that. It's anything but, actually. The main conflict of this movie is family trauma, generational family trauma. The main conflict of this movie doesn't only center around Mirabel, but all the other characters surrounding her. Mirabel comes from a family who lives in an enchanted house where everybody has their own gift. But Mirabel is the only person in the family to not have one. This simply being the thing could have fallen into a lot of cliches and led this film into a very tried and true route. But instead of that, I found Mirabel an incredibly likable character with plenty of development, who instead of being this quirky, I'm different character like I expected, turned into an incredibly relatable, likable character who has to confront that family trauma herself. Now, like I said, all the other members of the family have a gift. What I love is that they're not just used as plot devices or parts of the piece to make Mirabel a more complete character. But I'm so happy to say that's not what happens at all. In fact, almost all of the supporting cast has something to contribute to the story and characters. Some of my favorites include Luisa and Dolores, whose designs not only exemplify how diverse Colombian culture can be, but also show that just because you're gifted doesn't make you different from anybody else. I love that this movie doesn't just do work in making you sympathize with Mirabel, but also the others. Because most of the cases when it comes to these movies, they do the cliche of making everybody who's gifted incredibly unlikable, kind of rubbing their gifts in the face of the non-gifted person. But when you are gifted, you have have a lot of responsibilities and tasks placed on you that normally you wouldn't if you didn't have that gift. It kind of creates this win-win scenario for everybody who watches this movie to kind of relate to it. And some people treat the relation to these characters as a bad thing, when I don't really view it that way. Creating a blank slate just for you to project yourself onto a character to where that character has no traits or is able to develop, that's when you back yourself into a corner writing-wise. Mirabelle doesn't do so. Her character is incredibly nuanced. She goes on a journey. Her being the outcast of a family, which I'm sure many people can relate to, yes, is intentional, and I'm 100% sure contributes to the relatability. But it's done well, and when it's done well, I don't really see any issue in that. It's something incredibly important, and I love that they tackled it. Because Mirabelle doesn't have these powers, she has all these responsibilities placed on her, and a lot of blame thrown on her as well for not being gifted. So the characters being mean to her every once in a while is a little more nuanced than just that. They have their own problems and stressors that are on them 24/7 because of their gifts. Beba needing to be positive 24/7 so she doesn't control the weather into creating a tornado or giant storm or something. People constantly relying on Louise's strength. That's good. That's really good and isn't two-dimensional, which I love. The fact that this movie is so small-scaled allowed for me to connect to a Disney main character that I haven't been able to in a very long time. And even though those aforementioned side characters don't get as much development as Mirabelle, because of course they're not going to, I still get to understand their development, their trauma, their struggle, and that's what's most important. There is something special about Encanto, and I think that does need to be seen. When you think of a Disney princess, you usually think of this, or even this. Anna and Elsa aren't even technically Disney princesses, but you probably still think of them as Disney princesses before you would think of a character like Mirabelle. Is she my favorite? No, I still love characters like Moana. I mean, we can't forget about Jasmine. I mean, sorry, she just did things to me when I was 4 years old. But Mirabelle not having a gift, and while many of the Disney princesses don't necessarily have a gift, and in fact, many of them are damsels in distress, they kinda all fit in line with each other. Please, Disney fans, don't get mad at me, I like them. A character like Snow White and Aurora you would think of in the same breath as a Cinderella. But Mirabelle isn't that by any means. She's not even like Raya, who's bland, I mean a badass. There is no prince, there is no giant monster to fight at the end. Everything is rooted in drama, family, and heart. Not just Mirabelle as a character, but the story as a whole. Seeing her connections to the other characters like Antonio, which I thought was so sweet. But even a character like him who's established earlier on in the film but doesn't carry on until the very end, is used in moments when he's needed, and it feels welcome. Every character in here is used sparingly. They're used exactly how they're needed when they're needed, and it helps the story and characters progress perfectly. All of it isn't tied up in a perfect bow like a present, but somehow it comes out like that anyways. That made absolutely no sense what I just said. Some of the characters, their abilities, the magic as a whole in this movie being left up for interpretation is what I think helps this movie most of all. If this movie was just a giant exposition jump, which there is exposition at points, but it's done when it's needed. I don't need to know exactly how this magic works. I don't need to know the logisticals because we're watching a Disney princess movie after all. That's one of the things I love about Disney so much, is the magic. Things being left up for interpretation. Things not being a closed book allows for some magic and imagination and wonderment. Not only does some of my favorite movies of all time achieve this, but Encanto was able to do so as well, even if it isn't one of my favorite movies of all time. And there are plenty of things holding this movie back from being one of my favorites of all time. Once again, like I stated, some of my favorite Disney movies are ones that don't fall into the trap of action-adventure, and this movie does have some of that towards the very end. Not just that, but it feels very slapped on. I hope I'm not the only one that feels this. I feel like the movie was pacing along very well until we get to that moment at the end. It felt like they needed some stuff to put in the trailer to make the movie look more exciting than just a family drama, so they needed to do this, and it's honestly the most boring part of the movie. It did a great job at balancing the drama with the excitement with the musical numbers, which don't worry is how I want to end this video off. We will be talking about the musical numbers. I kind of just feel like this was really unnecessary. Now, if somehow you haven't seen Encanto and you don't want to hear any minor spoilers, I'm not going to go too heavy in them, but there are going to be some implications in here, so beware. After the quote-unquote action scene and all of the conflict is somewhat resolved, the movie does have a very happy ending. And while yes, a happy ending is very nice every once in a while, and it is a Disney movie, and while yes, I selfishly like Mirabelle a lot as the character and wanted to see her have her happy ending, I'm the cynical bastard that would have made a Disney movie and had it end really freaking sad. With this ending I'm about to propose, not only would this have avoided the big action set piece at the end, which can entirely ruin the pacing of the movie, all of the characters and drama is going to be resolved too. All of these characters who have had to either suppress or succumb to standards that were put on them against their will, and throughout the movie, these have been shown to affect these characters very negatively. This family can be very troubling and toxic, and can weigh on you heavily, and not everybody is very happy. So, I would have had all of the characters come together that were gifted, including Mirabel, and in a big, sad musical number. It kind of gives you a big adrenaline rush like the end of the Speed Racer movie from 2008, and nobody saw that, never mind. They used their powers to their exact fullest, and all of the magic that is inside of them actually destroys the house at the end of the movie. But unlike the real movie, it doesn't get put back together. All the characters no longer have their magic. I don't know, enough of the fanfiction. I really do think this movie should have ended on a musical number though. And this all kind of brings us back to how this video even got made. We Don't Talk About Bruno. We Don't Talk About Bruno is without a doubt one of Disney's biggest hits in a very, very long time. Music-wise, of course. Now, I'm not a musical guy, let me just say that. My taste in music is like Tyler, the Creator, Frank Ocean, Brockhampton, and that kind of stuff. Oh, we can't forget about Kanye West, Playboy Cardi, we're my fellow Slash Sad, we got Tim Impala. I can always get down to some Cage the Yellow. Point is, I'm not a musical guy. I saw Book of Mormon once with my friend Mark in New York, and that's it. But I kind of like the music in this. The music in this movie was done by Lin-Manuel Miranda. He also did the music for Moana, which I also really like. I mean, there's some actual bops in there. And don't get me wrong, I really do like the songs in these. I think they're good. I don't think they're bad by any means. But I think one of the reasons why the music in this movie works so much is because of the movie. I think the shot composition, the cinematography, all of that, especially in the musical numbers, is done so well. And especially, We Don't Talk About Bruno. I think that's the best example. Also, like, this movie as a whole is absolutely gorgeous. I don't know how Disney keeps doing this. This is a freaking beautiful movie. For the first time in forever, I wouldn't be mad if Disney takes home the award at their own ceremony again. Yeah, they own the Oscars too. So, I kinda liked Encanto. Now remember, I'm still a part of the Tangled gang and the Moana squad, so it hasn't reached those heights yet, but maybe in a couple years it will. I'll be part of the Encanto club. This movie kinda made me fall in love with Disney again. Not him. Despite some really greedy business practices and some really bad things that they do every once in a while, Disney and their other studios still produces a lot of great art, and this is proof of that. There's really nothing I can complain about with Encanto when its release. It got a theatrical release, then it was on Disney Plus, and now it's extremely popular. The film was treated with respect, the movie is great, there's nothing I can really complain about here, other than some minor pacing issues in the final act. This gave me a lot of faith in Disney animation. Even though Strange World does sound interesting, it is being made by the guy who didn't make necessarily my favorite Disney animation movies, but if this movie taught me anything, it's to give something a try. Okay, I'm not giving that a try, Bob. I'm not going to dinner with you. I don't like it.
First couple rats are spinning on some new Chanel. Caught a whiffing out, ooh, got that new smell.